to the fact we just wrapped up an executive session. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available for viewing on the Methuen Public Schools website. Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Member DiZoglio?
Present.
Member Donovan?
Here.
Member Keegan?
Present.
Member Maxwell?
Present.
Member Shabilia?
Here.
Member Willett?
Here.
Mayor Beauregard.
Here. We need a motion and a second to accept the agenda as presented for March 31st, 2025.
So moved.
Motion from Member Shabilia, second is from the Vice Chair. Discussion? There's no discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Now we will rise for the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is public participation. We do have some comments that were submitted electronically. Does anyone else, though, before we do that, have any public comment? If not, we will read into the record the content that was submitted.
I attempted to compare the proposed budgets by measuring a few key metrics. However, the information provided in the packet and previous year's budget packets were not sufficient to compare to prior actual expenditures. The chart of accounts in the education budget expenditures is severely lacking in definition and organization. There are no delineations between fixed and variable cost or delineation between expenses and labor-related expenses and labor salaries. Additionally, there are no mappings from the numbers presented in the provided packets to the cost centers or accounts in the general ledger, and this prevents my comparison or understanding of how the presented expenditures will affect the finances of the city. There are no discussions in the packet about school performance or how the expenditures from the previous year affected school performance or the forecast of how these planned FY26 expenditures will affect school performance. A significant portion of the FY25 budget was paid out to vendors and consultants through contracts. However, there are no discussions of contracts, their performance, and no visibility into which items in the final budgets and actual expenses are sent to vendors through contract vehicles. Our contract performance goals established, our key performance indicators established and monitored. And cost-plus contracts are the cost adequately evaluated promptly. Essentially, are there vendors performing their services as required, and how can you show your work? In CY24, the City of Methuen's Education Department was proven unable to monitor school performance as identified by the rodent issues and the heating failures, both of which were distinct failures of supervision of either personnel performance or vendor performance. FY26 is an opportunity for the City of Methuen Education Department to refocus on results. Request 1. Provide the FY26 budget estimates in the same chart of accounts that is used to report actual expenditures at the city as seen in the transparency dashboard. 2. Provide definitions for the usage of each account. 3. Provide a view of the FY26 budget that categorizes expenses into at least 3 organizational classes: labor, contract, general expenses. 4, provide information about the contractors' contract performance for any contracts that will be funded through the budget. 5, provide an explanation as to the department will use the FY26 funds to prevent the catastrophes that were witnessed in calendar year 24. Bobby King.
My understanding is that that's the only comment that was submitted electronically. So at this point, we will close public participation. If you are unable to make a meeting in person for public participation, you can send an email to Martha Sorois at masirois@methuen.k12.ma.us before 3 p.m. on the day of a school committee meeting. So at this point, Superintendent, I'll invite you to start the continued discussion regarding this look ahead at the fiscal year 26 preliminary budget document. Just for the sake of discussion, this is going to come up as a question, I know. We are still in the process, the CAFO and I, of finalizing a number in terms of the city contribution. We will get that to the superintendent this week. It's drop dead this week, deadline for that. I will say that there are a lot of other uncertainties that are at play, namely regarding the availability of federal funding. I know that we're still waiting on official word about what to expect in that regard. And then also, what I will say is, I know there was a story in the paper about how this is a proposed $20 million increase to the proposed budget. At this point, we're having these initial discussions about what some of the needs and desires are going forward for fiscal year 26. But I can say with, we're going to have the number this week, but we're certainly going to be significantly closer to net school spending than I think we're thinking of here. But nevertheless, we can begin the conversation with that as background.
Okay. So I did give everybody a packet of slides for tonight. I did add a couple of slides based on some conversations since the posting of this Thursday. So this has been reposted, just the last few slides. Again, just some information that came from a few school committee members. We might as well put it out there since I had it. But basically, the slides are in order of just trying to synthesize some of the requests from the school committee from the last meeting, information, right? I think this was information. There was a lot to process. And I do expect, and if you don't, I guess I totally understand. And if you do have more questions tonight, that's also what we expect, to search and sort of find other answers that you guys might have to your questions. So this was one of the questions that came from Member Keegan of which of the positions that we have on the books right now that are new are non-negotiable, meaning that are service delivery based on requirements. So I have put those here so you can see from each school which positions those are and the total amount of dollars that those positions equal. 26 of those are special education. I kept the 4 ELE ones in there because while they are not in an individualized education plan like special education, without those additional staff, we will 100% be out of compliance for service delivery for our English learners. Again, it's a little bit different, but I just need to make sure that that is really clear for everybody. So I did leave those 4 requests in here that you'll see. There's a note on the side, Member Keegan had brought up as well, that the narratives didn't seem to match with the program assistance that we were eliminating. So that has been corrected, and the narratives reflect an accurate reflection of the total number of program assistants coming out of the K-4 program, if indeed we go ahead with Constellations. So I don't know if there's any questions about that slide or that information. Member Keegan or anybody else, did that answer your question?
Member Shabilia?
So this is 1.3 million of net new positions needed to keep us in compliance.
Correct.
I know that you aren't prepared to answer this question, but I'm asking anyways. Of our budget now, what is required to keep us in compliance? Just, do you know a percentage offhand? Like, of the positions we currently have?
I don't have a number, but I would say that in the current FY25 budget, anything that we haven't reduced because of caseloads and numbers, which we've already gone through that process. So you'll see in some of the schools last week, we presented a reduction in, I'm looking at resource room teachers in a couple of places. Just as kids move, those numbers become smaller.
Okay.
So we've already done that. So we've done the caseload part of that work with special education, and any reductions that we felt were necessary have already happened. So everything else that's currently in the budget or presented to you last week is what we would need for compliance to for service delivery. Any of the speech and OT requests, that's all part of this as well.
And this can change after October 1st?
This could change after today.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to be clear, that if we do not fund these positions,
then these students have to go out of district to get the services that we're required to give them. And that would cost even more money.
Yeah, so yes, we're required to provide the services, so one way or the other. I mean, some of these are one-to-one nurses, that I can't replicate that in the district for some of the needs that the kids have at this point. But yes, if we can't service those become compensatory services at some point. Again, these are all a little bit different. Some of these are one-to-one PAs. So I won't be compliant with the students' services if I don't have those positions. I know I don't know which other. I know you guys are trying to ask me to say it in different ways. I don't know how else to say it. There are some of these positions, like we're gonna have to have these positions, so I have to figure out how to get to give to get. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I know we have to fund these positions, but also that, like I said, this is not negotiable, but the problem also it's going to cost us more money because finding people for these positions are also hard. So we're going to be in that situation anyways, but I understand from the point. I just want the public to know it's really hard to find these positions. So we need that extra money anyways, because we're going to be paying for out services until we get these people in the school. So that's why just having them there, at one point we could bring them back. So I want people to understand that from both sides of that.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on.
Okay. So this was a request from member Maxwell. I think just to break down, I had it into 3 groups: students with special needs versus students with sub-separate needs and non-sub-separate needs. So we had some of that in the narrative, but we had some additional things in there. So I basically just broke it down into the 3 groups. So if you look, and I kept it with 21 versus 20 now, current, so a 5-year difference. So the first line there, the SWD, PK through 12, those are the total number of students with disabilities we have in the district. So 1395 in 2021 and 1581 this year. The SS stands for sub-separate. So sub-separate pre-K through 12 plus. In 2020, we had 209, and this year we have 286. And the non-students, non-sub-separate special education kids make up the rest. So I don't know if there are any questions on that information.
I have some questions. So it says students with disabilities. Is this IEPs and 504s?
No, just IEPs.
So through the numbers that you provided the last meeting, there are 1,380 students on IEPs.
Yep, so this would include out-of-district students as well. This is our total student population. I can't forget about those as a total.
So this is actually the number of students we have with IEPs. The 1581, not the 1380.
Yes.
Okay. So
It's a total number.
what are, I mean, how many students are out of district?
180, 175.
And how many of these, so I guess with the budget that was from last week, and I guess with this slide here, I did write and ask about separating out the services provided of reading services, writing versus OT and speech, and I think that that's critical for us to know because, for instance, we have the Marsh who has 227 students on an IEP, and we have 268 at the Timony, and I understand that the Marsh has high needs, so I'm not suggesting that anything be taken or not given to the Marsh, but I think that obviously it looks like here that the Timony is, very underserved in comparison with their teachers. So I'm just curious to see the breakdown of the actual services needed.
Yep. So I did respond to your request on Friday in an email, just saying that if we were going to do what you requested, it would be the SEAs would have to go through each IEP by hand. So there's a way that we can break it down a little differently. It wouldn't be as specific as what you're looking for, but it would be the data that we send to the state, and I can get that. It's definitely not going to be broken down by each student's grid with how much service they receive. I don't have that.
I don't think the need of how much service they need is as important as finding out how many have certain needs for certain services, and do we have the staff to service them?
So the budget that we're presenting to you has been developed with the SEAs, the principals, and Gina at every single school, saying this is the service delivery requirements of the school by way of teachers, by way of related service providers, program assistants, et cetera. So everything that we're presenting is what is going to cover the service deliveries of each of the schools with what we presented to you last week.
I mean, I would just be interested in seeing the breakdown, because I think that that's, like I said, I think that's significant, and I think that it's important for us to make that decision with the budget in mind. I feel like maybe we don't need certain positions, or maybe we do need more positions, and that is very interesting to me, because I want to make sure that every child is getting serviced the way that they should. Also, there are IEPs in our districts that are state puts, and there are also IEPs that aren't currently being serviced. So I would be interested in seeing those numbers as well. Because we have, let's say 1,300 IEPs. How many of them are state puts and not actually being serviced?
A state put doesn't mean that they're not getting service. They're getting service by their most recent.
Sure, right,
Right?
yes.
Thank you.
But I think those numbers are important as well, only because I think that it kind of gives us an idea of how many kids may be either on their way out or on your radar of needing more services or whatnot, so.
I guess I'm still confused. Yeah, please. I just want to make sure I get the request. Is the green light on?
Sorry. When I met with the Timony staff, we looked at all the services, caseload, all of those pieces. So for the Timony, for the budget, we're proposing an additional resource room teacher, because the level of need for students that require the pull-out resource room or inclusion support is higher than in some of the other buildings. Whereas at the Marsh, we're asking for more staff to support the sub-separate program, but when we actually looked at their resource room services and levels, we're reducing a resource room teacher at the Marsh as well as the CGS. So through the budget process and all those discussions, those are all the things that we're looking at throughout the year to determine, so that when we propose the budget, we are increasing or reducing necessary levels of service.
Okay. I mean, I still am interested to see the breakdown of what services are being needed versus what is not, and what we have for staff and what we don't. I'm still interested in those numbers. I think that that's really important, especially for this budget.
So I understand the breakdown. We'll get you what we can.
Yep.
I'm still confused about what you're looking for staffing. So what we presented to you last week in the budget narrative has FY25 compared to FY26.
Right. I understand that what you presented is what you think, or the schools think, would be most beneficial, or
Yes.
that is the desire of what that school needs. I would like to see the need rather than the want. So the breakdown of those numbers are going to help us with the actual
So I would say
need.
to you that anything special education related is a need, not a want.
Okay. I would still request the breakdown.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll move on.
Okay, so this was a request from member Willett, a historical breakdown of custodial and maintenance reductions over the course of, and we went with FY14 was the actual year that I could find the most reliable information by staffing. So I went with FY14 compared to FY25, and within that time frame, we are 17.5 less custodial and maintenance staff. So I don't know if there's any questions about that.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in terms of the grounds operations for the school department,
Yep.
does that entail a municipal chargeback to take care of the grounds, or are people doing double duty?
Yeah,
on
our custodians-
Building interior, building exterior?
Correct. Our
They're
custodians have
doing
taken
double
on.
duty?
Yes, our custodians have taken on some of the general groundskeeping around the buildings. And then in the summer, we do have some contracted service that do the larger, like lawn mowing and mulching and things like that. But for the most part, it's the custodians in the building that do the preventative maintenance and stuff around the buildings.
So is there a municipal chargeback involved at all? Is there
think so.
outside vendors that come in? Is it
We-
landscaping companies that come in?
Last year was the first time we went out to bid for landscaping over the summer, just because we didn't have the staff to really pull out of the buildings. We did get a company out of Lowell that did 5 of our 6 buildings. We did Branch Street ourselves. And it was to the tune of like $80,000, way cheaper than hiring a 3-man ground crew.
Okay.
They did a decent job. They're willing to do it for the same price next year. So we're in the process of locking them up for that next year. There is not an exact chargeback from the city per se for mowing fields or anything like that. They may do, some of the bigger fields, the baseball fields and stuff like that. But we do get, as part of our chargeback agreement, which needs to be renewed, but it's been pretty consistent over the last years. We do pay a certain percentage of the DPW's total charges, and I'll get the exact percentage of you. It's not that high. But that includes trash removal and things like that.
In terms of like what was passed and recommending to us in terms of reclamation of taking away the foliage and bringing down trees, and is that landscaping company doing those things? Because when I went to the Timony,
They do mowing, weed whacking. They do like a fall cleanup. They come around and they get, all the leaves, and they do the beds and that kind of stuff. That would be above and beyond.
Okay.
We do have tree companies that we work with that it is in this budget to do it right away in July under the extraordinary maintenance line. So, but it's not that group.
okay. And then, do we have a sense of like when the $4 million deficit took shape based on a prior superintendent? Is that when we hit the wall in terms of the custodians? Because you're talking about roughly a 10-year look-back period. So you have the final number versus the prior number. Was the $4 million deficit, is that when we really hit the custodial ranks, or was it? Because we had 2 successive $8 million increases to our budget due to the Student Opportunity Act. And I know the city had an obligation to pay down that school deficit because of a prior administration with the superintendent. When did we hit that wall with the custodians?
I mean, I would say it wasn't all at once. I would say it was more gradual.
It was a piecemeal?
Yeah, it was a piecemeal. When we did have those years of the good funding, nothing was cut or very little. If, maybe a retirement we didn't refill if we felt it wasn't, worth it. But for the most part, it's been piecemeal up until this point.
And then I know with the ice ring, that's based on the revolving account. and
Correct.
They get paid out of that?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the lunch program, I know it's kind of difficult because we're talking about federal versus state. I know the state with the millionaire's tax does have a revenue stream. The federal, we don't know. It could probably be canceled or stimulus funding that ended.
Yep.
Now, the lunch program, is that potentially revolving to clean up the lunch areas with those custodial crews, or
do-
you have to be careful
We
about
do,
that?
we do have a certain percentage of, we have custodial support within the cafeterias, so we can justify, right now, we pay 2 full-time custodians out of the cafeteria. So, district-wide.
And then what schools would those be at?
What we do is we pick 2. We do half of a custodian at 4 grammar schools, is what
Okay.
we do. So that it's evenly, when the auditors come in, I can justify, a .25 position to help clean the caf, wipe down the tables, and that kind of stuff. But it also, I don't want it to appear as though we're using the U.S. government to fund all of our custodians.
No, and again, it's just-
So that's why
Yeah.
that's why we split it up and make sure it's a, 0.25 at each building. I'm sorry, 0.5 at each building, which equals 2 full-time custodians.
Yeah. Well, again, the reason why I asked the question is that one of the schools was pretty even keel with the maintenance crew from beginning to end in terms of the years we're talking about. Another school had a reduction of 2. Another school had a reduction of 1, but another school had a reduction of 3, and the high school had a reduction of 4. I just want to make sure if it's common sense of backfilling as much as possible, that those 2 people are allocated to schools that have been kind of like reduced in terms of the workforce, as opposed to rotating, because again, issues arose and we need to be able to backfill and help with those situations.
I think one thing we did do in here is last year, obviously, we cut a CGS custodian. And we feel, we got too close to the bone, I believe. So first thing, we wanted to backfill that and at least make them whole before we start adding additional to other places. And I would add as many as I could if I knew we had as much money as we needed. But again, we got to find a happy balance, I believe.
And then this was something I mentioned during prior meetings in terms of the rental fees, what it's being allocated for, when's the last time it was visited. Again, I only represent one voice, one vote. I want a hybrid approach, maybe have a cleaning crew when we have vacation breaks or if someone's on a sick leave or we have a depleted staff. That rental fee account, especially with the Timony and the Tenny, because those are high-traffic schools. What exactly does that entail? Is that just to repair internally the schools? Is it help with overtime? Could it potentially help with the outside cleaning crew?
Yep, it does both. It helps with facilities to some degree, buying supplies, paper towels, stuff for the bathrooms that get used and consumed. So we do make sure we backfill there. It pays for all the overtime for custodians who are working those events. It also pays for a full-time custodian out of central office. We have a courier and a second shift custodian out of central office. We use the funds from the small gym at Branch Street to cover one of those salaries. So yeah, we do use those funds. We're just careful how we do it.
Okay. And when was the last time it was revisited with, in terms of the rental fees? When was the last time?
We should probably rewrite the policy.
Okay.
It needs to be revisited. We just need to find someone to revisit it. Maybe NASBO has a
Yeah.
As a policy.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions or discussion regarding? Here we go. Member DiZoglio?
Yeah, real quick. So when it comes to the grounds crew, again, like I know Member Willett covered it. Like I said, going back when the last superintendent was in office, like I said, we did volunteer work. We did that. Again, I feel like that is something we can capitalize, help kids maybe do an internship program. I know money is tight, but like I said, I feel like with the $80,000, maybe we could put it towards that, get kids jobs working with the schools, maybe potentially become a stream of baby custodians. Because I know that's how the last superintendent did it. That's how she kind of found a little pipeline. I don't know if we're interested in doing that or we have that type of capabilities right now. I feel like if we can deplete $80,000 and put it to something good, we could think about doing that.
I agree. It would be great to get kids involved. When we did do that, we had 3 full-time staff members that we were paying to the total of probably about $150,000 a year to supervise those kids and make sure they were safe, and then paying those kids on top of that. We might be more interested, maybe not this year with the vendor we have coming in, but maybe next year we go out to bid for somebody who's interested in hiring a couple of our kids on their crew. And, you know, they add that to the bid, and it's a little bit more, but they're working for them. They supervise them. It's on their insurance, but our kids are getting the skills, they're getting the jobs, they're getting the income. So maybe that's something we should look at for next fiscal year. Not 26, but 27.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Member Donovan?
I know we're all looking back at what used to be, when there was a lot more money around, but I remember having the grounds crew from the city side come and do some significant, this was a while ago, significant, like the pruning, the going around the buildings, getting rid of the shrubs. I don't know if that's feasible now, but, and I think who was it? For Retro brought it up at our joint meeting. I think it would not be a bad idea, if it's feasible, to utilize.
I welcome the collaboration with the city.
What?
I welcome the collaboration with the city. I mean,
know you do.
We work well with a lot of the departments.
Yeah. So how would we get that?
Recreation,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
one hand washes the other.
How would we
Yeah,
get that conversation started? And I know we have to consider all the members involved. So,
Yeah, I think, you know, there's always a better way of doing things, right?
Yep.
And, you know, it doesn't hurt to look back at things that have worked in the past and see how we can incorporate that potentially going forward as a way to streamline things as we plan for fiscal year 26 on the city side.
so maybe it could be brought up. I don't know how this conversation, we talk about it's a good idea, but how can we take the steps to maybe have a conversation to see if it's feasible?
I think at this rate, you know, I'm in the process of meeting with each department head to plan for fiscal year 26. So this is something that I can certainly bring back to DPW. Member Willett?
Just a quick question through the chair to Ian. When we have these vendors and landscaping companies and outside people coming onto our campus, do they have to abide by the Corey checks like any type of employee?
Yep.
And again, I'm not a big fan of Corey. Should be the FBI database. It's more comprehensive. It's not state adjudication matters. But do they go through Corey, any type of vendors?
All our vendors go through the Corey check. If they don't have a Corey, they don't step foot in our buildings.
And then also, in terms of what the city council was doing, work in conjunction with the mayor, do we know about like their tax status? And also in terms of E-Verify to make sure they're all on board? Is that something we as a committee should explore further?
I'm not sure the ins and outs of E-Verify, but we do have to go on to the state. There's a state website we have to go on to make sure that they're tax compliant and they haven't been debarred
Okay.
by the state. So we do that before we sign any contract.
Okay. But it's something for future discussion too, in terms of E-Verify, because I want to make sure, and again, I'm not accusing any particular company, but it's something to explore. Okay, thank you.
All right, so I added the next one, just in the spirit of the one that Member Willett asked. I had the information, so I calculated it, just so you all could see. Since 2014, we've had 9 less clerical staff. I know we've been asking for additional clerical staff to come back in probably almost every budget I've presented to the school committee in 7 years, but just to see sort of a snapshot of where we are with clerical staff in the district.
Member Maxwell?
I know here it says that all the lower schools have 2 clerical positions. So I'm assuming that's the upper school and lower school receptionist.
Correct.
What is the parent liaison if they're not the receptionist?
So the parent liaison is really just that. They are doing translations. They're sitting in IEP meetings to translate. If the phone calls come in and we need somebody who speaks primarily Spanish, they're translating those phone calls for staff.
So they are not primarily a secretary.
They are not. That is not actually their primary role, and that's unfortunately what many of them have taken on because of the need. But that is not their primary role. It's actually meetings, parent conferences. They come to the parent conferences for the afternoon and the evenings as well.
Any other questions regarding the clerical slide?
Wow.
Member Shabilia?
So this trip down memory lane has been enjoyable. Do you like that, Member Donovan? I'm glad. And it's great. It's sad. We used to have money and now we don't, and here we are, and we don't know what we're getting and what we're not getting, and it's it's going to be interesting. But I guess other than to show that we've had staffing cuts, which I think everybody already knows that the positions we're discussing have been cut. What did we accomplish in the last couple of slides?
Just request
Was
from
it-
the school committee and showing.
But then that's great. But what did that information do for anybody? Because I feel like we were just rehashing previous fiscal years, and but we.
I think
we-
it's just it's a show, Member Shabilia, and I totally understand where you're going, but I think there's a conversation, and I've heard from this committee loud and clearly. The more data we can share, the better off we're going to be in the community as well. And I think part of what I know I'm hoping is that people really understand we're in a place that I don't feel we should be in. And as a superintendent of schools, I feel very confident in saying that over the course of my career here in Methuen. There's been almost every year, it's been about cutting. Every year I've been in this district for 23 years, it's been about cutting. And I think for me, there's a time and I don't know if we're here, and I don't think it's going to end here, but just to show the community that at what point are we going to stop cutting? How much are we going to have to cut? Right? I think there's some really unfortunate narratives out in the community that have lived on for many years previous to you even living in Methuen. And I think there is something to that here that people still talk about, right? Of certain things that happened 12 years ago, certain things that happened 7 years ago, certain things that happened 10 years ago. So I just think putting the information out there in a fashion that everybody can kind of understand and grab onto is only going to be helpful for us to fight for what I think we need. And again, I'm not here to bankrupt the city, so don't misunderstand. But as the superintendent of schools, it is absolutely my job to advocate for what the schools need, and I will every year. I will also do the hard work to make sure that we prepare a budget that is going to pass and won't bankrupt the city. So it's a place that we seem to always be in every single year in this community.
So I agree.
That was a long answer of what did we just accomplish? It's information, I think, sharing. And so there's actually numbers out there instead of just throwing out a nebulous. We've cut every year. It's just holding on to some of those tangible numbers, maybe.
So I agree, and I've been one to advocate for the data, but I guess where my frustration stems from is I've been listening to the conversations, and it comes back to, we need to add bodies here, we need to add bodies there, we need to add bodies here. The secretaries are overworked. They can't answer the doors at the CGS because they're too busy doing things, and you have parents upset at the door because they can't get into the building. The custodial staff is overburdened, and we just spent a boatload of money to clean up the buildings that we don't have a plan to maintain. Not that we're not trying, but we don't have the human capital to do so. And we're talking about adding heads, but if we're going to be closer to net school spending, even the slide you showed us last week where we're not getting the additional 40 is a pipe dream. And I know that the mayor had mentioned we'll have the number by the end of the week, and that is both fantastic and slightly ominous. But it's just I'm having a hard time because I feel like we're just kind of dancing. And I guess that's it for that one, I guess.
Keep going. All right, then.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Member Willett?
just very briefly, the reason why I asked for information is to give me context. For example, Member Donovan had talked about the groundskeeper and pruning the trees in the grounds. And that was identified in a report submitted to our attention regarding the rodents and the pests, that you need to prune your trees. You need to get away from the foliage. You need to remove the leaves and any debris outside of your buildings. So we are dealing with a very constrained budget. I understand that. But I'm also obligated to talk to constituents, and they have issues. And again, the superintendent is bringing up certain issues. Now, ultimately, I might have to vote on a very difficult budget. That's a bare bones budget because we're not going to receive any assistance from the state. And there's a possibility we might not receive as much from the federal government. But in the very least, we should be having these conversations because these were brought up in reports. These are issues that were brought up in the past. And if things are neglected, we should at least talk about it. Now, I know the superintendent has a reorganization plan about custodians and maintenance, and that might be one of my priorities. Last year, it was talking about the crisis intervention. And I said, I'm not going to vote for a budget unless it has the crisis intervention. I have certain goals in mind, but I'm not going to lay out my cards right now. I never did in 14 years of service. This is a fluid situation. We have to wait for the numbers, and we will have good give and take and debate, and we try to reach a consensus. If not, we have a majority that will vote on a budget. But things were brought to our attention from constituents speaking at the podium. And it's included in the superintendent's report. And I give her kudos that she is bringing up these issues to us. Because again, if we neglect it, if we do like the deep cleaning through the mayor, that's outstanding. But if we have these issues 4 or 5 years down the line without a plan in place, without some type of accountability, shame on us. But that's part of an ongoing conversation that I have no problem with. If someone requests information, I'm not going to critique the information they're requesting. I never did. I said, okay, that's great. I'll review it, and if I have questions, if not, I move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Willett. Any other comments about the clerical slide? Just to quickly echo, I guess, piggyback off of what Member Shabilia said. So if I had the ability to give the school department literally everything that they were looking for in terms of meeting the needs outlined in this presentation, I think as somebody who has been really focused on education,
I know you would.
yeah, I would if I could. The thing, though, that we have to keep in mind is that this year of all years is probably one of the most difficult planning years in terms of budget that potentially the city has seen in many years. Certainly, Superintendent, you can probably reference, I don't know if we've ever had a time like this in at least recent memory in terms of uncertainty from the federal level on down. And so, ultimately, my responsibility is going to be to ensure that we're able to preserve our city's fiscal health by making difficult yet responsible decisions. And, I'm going to do the best that I can with the resources that we have available, but nevertheless, when we're talking about overall a projection of, a $20 million increase year over year for the school department budget, I think that anybody here at this table can understand how that's not possible. It's not going to but we're going to do our best to ensure that we're providing our students with the education they deserve, and we're going to do what we can to get to that point. But nevertheless, we're in for a tough couple of weeks in terms of planning. Member DiZoglio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, I've been on school committee for 5 years now, and this is your first time as mayor, so I'm not going to hold this against you. But the previous mayor always said the same thing, that we're always tough, but I would love to give a bucket of money to the schools. And, you know, and I get it. We are the biggest budget, and I know the needs with the state and everything, but I've heard it 5 years in a row that it's like, I would give it to all of you, and I would love to do this. And then every year we're cutting. It's been every year, which I'm not saying that you have a difficult decision to make, which I'm not doing that. But for some people, it's a really hard pill to keep swallowing when it's like, I get it when it isn't your fault. It's the state, it's everybody else's. And I'm not going to go into the details, but it's really hard to swallow it over and over again, especially being in this, well, not in this chair, but it is hard to keep hearing that when we have students, like, they're the future. Your child, my niece, my future, my nephew. And I keep saying it over and over again. It's really hard a pill to swallow when it seems like our kids, and this is throughout the Commonwealth, is always taking the back burner. This is a state issue, and I understand that, and I want to make sure parents hear this at home. Why is our children always the second to everything else? That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member DiZoglio. Just in response, I have a 6-year-old who's going to be going into our public school system in the fall. So as somebody who's going to be a Methuen Public Schools parent in just a couple of months, I completely understand and appreciate what you're saying. I think, though, that anyone who is critical of the difficult decisions that we're going to have to make in terms of priorities as it relates to the budget, I mean, the only other solution is for those individuals to go to the public and request a Prop 2.5 override, which I can tell you exactly how that's going to go. So I think it's just important to just be cognizant of the realities, certainly aiming for the best here. But the other thing, too, I want to point out, you know, what we have here for the school department, you know, we're talking in the context of budget. This is more along the lines of a spending plan. It's not really, you know, you think of a budget, there's a, you know, revenue source and everything. This is really a spending plan. And, you know, ultimately, you know, we're going to reference the word cut, making cuts. You know, I think in terms of the presentation that we have here, that $20 million suggested increase in this presentation, you know, those are things that perhaps the district is hoping for, aiming for, but reductions to that, I don't want to say that that's a cut, because it's actually not. I just want to be careful about the wording that we use as well. I'll leave it there. Member Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I got to give credit to the superintendent in terms of, if you look at North Andover, what they're experiencing, and they, again, have very intelligent people. They did an analysis of the budget. They went through a process. They went through a collective bargaining agreement. They had similar issues to us with the maintenance. And they also had an explosion of special education dollars, and they're a wealthier community than us, right? They are dealing with a dire straits budget of a $4 million deficit. Personally, I don't want to go down that road again. And I just want to say, for the record, is that other communities, the stimulus money, they really use for personnel, which they shouldn't have done. And the superintendent, I looked at the prior budget that was finalized for us. We did, for the circuit breaker, we did a carry forward provision. So we paid ahead. And I think that was a very prudent thing. Unfortunately, because of the explosion of special education, that's gone right now. Now, if you look at transportation of the prior budget and a couple of years ago, there was an increase of about $100,000. It was kind of stabilized. projecting forward for special education, transportation, and the regular ed budget, it's going to be about $2.5 million in that range. So you got $2.5 million that we're not going to have with the circuit breaker carrying through because of an explosion of special education cases. You got another 2.5 increase with transportation. What we were talking about is October 1st with Member Shabilia is beyond that, you're on your own of any additional students. So that's a $2 million increase. What Member Keegan was talking about with the special education in terms of information. So if you start lining up everything, and then collective bargaining agreements, health insurance increases, municipal chargebacks, and then you get a pittance of, I would say, more towards the COVID days of almost pre-Student Opportunity Act, right? We're going back in the wrong direction. We had like 2 solid years of funding from the state, and then all these revenue streams that we talked about during prior meetings. And if you look online, a lot of it's going to the general fund. It's not going to local aid or to student aid or to school aid. And again, there's people at home and the teachers and the parents and even the students, stop making calls to your elected officials at the State House, because you still have an opportunity. From the governor's budget, we're all disappointed in, right? And the MTA has like about 115,000 members. Imagine if 115,000 members called up their state senators and state reps and be on record. Or we called up, I already did a letter. I did a letter last year. The only person that responded to me was the state senator. The state reps didn't respond to me. So I don't know if they're packing it in or they're just relying upon the governor's budget. If we don't speak up, we're going to go through the same painful cuts again. And I want to increase the budget, and I have certain goals. But I also, if you look at the reality of the situation, you're starting to just automatic costs and statutory obligations in transportation, circuit breaker, special ed, and all these things. It's not, we're going to have the same thing as last year because people are not mobilized. They'll mobilize before us, they'll mobilize before the city council, but right now they should be at Beacon Hill. But we've gone through the same conversation in years past. Thank you.
Member DiZoglio?
So when it comes off of transportation, like I said, I requested this like I think 3, 4, and Member Shabilia agreed with me on this, and we were trying to look into it about redistricting part of, especially when it came to the marsh and the Tenny. I'm looking, because like I said, I'm looking at this budget where we could cut corners everywhere. Is there any estimation what would happen if we were to bring those, like especially where Lowell Street is, where those buses pick up kids to bring to the Tenny? What would have happened if we could get rid of those bus routes? How much would that cost in reduction? Like I said, I'm looking at anywhere where we can cut and make it. I know that's a big thing to do, but that's why I was preparing for that. I think it was like 3 months ago I brought this up. So I would like to know where we can, if this would be feasible.
Yeah, I think moving kids from a Marsh bus to a Tenny bus, we don't.
No.
It's not like the Tenny buses don't have kids on them right now. Yeah, we would still need those buses.
Well, no,
They're just bringing them to a different school, especially when you're talking about the Forest Street, Lowell Street area.
yeah,
That's not walking distance to anywhere.
yeah, but so if I'm correct though, if that one bus is picking up, because we pay, again, let me break transportation. We don't pay for gas, right? Do we pay for the gas and all that stuff?
Part of our contract.
Yeah, part of our contract. So that would, again, my dad was a truck driver, gas, everything, it pays into it. I'm looking at how much and how many buses possibly we could cut that route down and have people drive their kids at one point. Yes, please help.
So I think what Member DiZoglio was getting at, and what he may be missing, and keep me honest,
Yeah.
is the buses that are coming and passing, the Tenny buses that are passing by on their way to the Tenny, as the kids are waiting for a bus to the marsh. Now, I don't know what the vacancy, I don't know what the seats are on those buses. I don't know how many kids are there. And I don't think, I mean, I'm sure, Ian, I'm sure you know everything. So I'm assuming you do. No pressure.
Let's not go there.
But that being said, it's not going to happen for July. And like I said, that's not realistic on a calendar perspective. But what our friends in North Andover did was hire a consultant to look at redistricting. And I know the R word is scary because it's an absolute nightmare. And I saw Lisa's head flip around when Ryan said redistricting earlier. And when before the federal government decided to do cartwheels with our funding, that was something I wanted to ask for, and I had a conversation with Attorney Maccaro about, is being able to put some money aside to bring in a consultant to look at it. Because, I mean, at least in my 12-ish years in the city, I don't think it's ever been done. Has it ever been done in your tenure? 1990, I mean, this city has changed 400 times since 1999. We have no idea. And I know it's a monster of a project. That's why we would bring in a consultant, but, now we're kind of out of money. But if it's something that we could consider, because, Member DeZoglia, I think that gives us our answers. Yeah. Because to ask our internal staff to go do that analysis, it's just not real.
I think, if I may, no, it has not been talked about in my talked about, bandied about.
I know it's always a rumor flying around.
Yeah, I think when it was talked about, maybe openly or in a public session with any prior school committee, it was talked about in a way that is a 3 to 5 year process of examine subcommittees, committees, community committees. What does that look like? So I don't think there's any opposition to that, just understanding how much time that's going to take and who knows what the outcome may be, with different lenses and a focus on it. But it's not something that, yes, our team can just pick up and put that on our to-do list to start looking at different, schools. And I think the one way we've I don't want to say subsidize. No, word retrieval is going to get me. Because we have these district-wide programs at certain grammar schools, right? The English Learner Beginner Program is at the CGS, and the Pathways Program is at the Marsh, primarily because they have the space to hold those programs, right? A lot of those kids in those programs are from the Tenney and Timony district, and I don't have any more space either, so there's a lot of that is happening as well. Like, you have these district-wide programs, right? Our Tenney specialized program houses 80 kids, but they're from all 4 schools, right? So yes, there's no, again, opposition to that. There's just an enormous amount of commitment from the community, and, the work that will go into that. Again, I don't think there's opposition to it. It's long overdue. How to get that started and who needs to be a part of that, those are all questions I think to work through.
I know you were hoping to retire before we would have to do that.
I might. Again, it's a long process. I think that's just something that you have to commit to. And I think it's also hard when you have you have 2-year votes. And I don't mean that in a negative way. That's a reality here in Methuen. You have the political turnover is also challenging when you're pushing something like that could be longer term, right? That could need more than 2 years worth of work to commit to.
Right, but I don't think at this point we want to commit to anything. And you may know from your conversations with the superintendent in North Andover, but my understanding is they had this consultant come in, they did some analysis, they consulted, did things, who knows?
Yeah.
But then they came forward with the plan and said, this is what we think you should do. And then the school committee was able to review it and decide, do we want to redistrict? Do we not want to redistrict based on now the information that they have? Because that consultant, their one job was to sit down with that data and figure it out. You've got 497 jobs.
Yeah, and I can inquire with her who they use just to see
I'd be curious what it costs, and then maybe, we've got 20 million in free cash certified by the state. So, can't hurt to ask the mayor to.
I will ask. I will definitely inquire with the superintendent in North Andover.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In the short term, since we're on busing, something that I would like looked at is busing is not something that is necessarily mandatory for a lot of our students. And it is one area that we could possibly look at to reduce our costs that wouldn't affect class sizes, would not affect learning, et cetera. And so what I'd like to do is explore how much busing we could reduce to save money so that it doesn't affect academics. And I know, for instance, we're not required to bus anyone above grade 6. And do I think we should cut all busing above grade 6? No, I do not. But what makes sense, and what could we expand our radiuses of who's not receiving busing so that we can possibly reduce that $20 million down a considerable amount without having to touch personnel.
Yes, we were expecting that this evening, so Ms. McCarthy and Mr. Goslin and I already began to discuss what that, we weren't sure exactly how it was going to be asked. We expected it to come up tonight, so we will definitely explore it. We have some ideas already on what we could explore.
Member Maxwell, then Member DiZoglio.
I just, off of that, I just kind of want to, maybe we can keep in mind the safety of no sidewalks.
Yeah, we wouldn't, yeah, so and let me preface that by our exploring would be anywhere with sidewalks, how close to the schools they are, any neighborhoods that would have safety. We would never talk about no sidewalk, correct. This is what I'm saying, like it's going to be in pieces. It's not going to be a wholesale. Like we could never say within a mile and a half of every school, we're just going to take away busing. We can't do that in this community because there's not sidewalks everywhere. Can't happen. But are there neighborhoods, are there different places, sections closest to the schools that do have sidewalks that are safe, that are within that mile, that we could reduce bus routes? Because right now, everybody gets buses in this district.
And just for the sake of discussion,
Most people get
Not
buses.
everybody.
Not everybody, but most, I
not
should have said
everybody.
that. He's like, wait. A lot of kids get buses with
Over 100 emails right now.
within a quarter mile, half a mile from the schools. Some because of safety, and some because the buses go right by.
just to mention, we had a recent meeting with DOT. They have, it's called Safe Routes to School program. And we had a meeting about initially the marsh and improving sidewalk access at the marsh. But then that turned into a conversation about taking a look at the CGS and other schools that are in need of a lot of, investment when it comes to pedestrian safety. So that's something that is a topic of conversation now. Member DiZoglio?
Yeah. So first, to piggyback off of Member Keegan, I would be all supportive of the 6th through up. The problem is when you have a Tenney student coming from Lowell Street, you can't really cut that off for a 6th grader. So that's why I would probably say that wouldn't work out until you redistrict. But just don't. And second of all, I am so happy that the fact that DOT is doing that. However, and I've made this public probably for 3 years now, is I hope it's concrete sidewalks instead of the tar sidewalks that we get all the time, because tar sidewalk is ugly, and concrete it is. It's awful when, especially on 110, when you have concrete for one pot and then it becomes.
They're coming back to, that's part of the next cycle of their project, is they're going to be installing the concrete. Just so you know.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair?
Just to be clear, Member DiZoglio, just to address this, if we were to get rid of all busing from 6 up, we probably would have a huge attendance problem at the high school, right? Because that means everybody like from the Marsh District would have to somehow get to the high school, right? And so it's not realistic to say that we're going to get rid of all busing, even if we redistricted the middle schools, right?
Can you clarify what specifically? Because I thought you were saying 6 and up.
I said, I don't think that's realistic. We can't do that because our high school kids coming from the Marsh District, how are they going to get to school, right? Like, we have to be smart about it. And so that's why I'm saying, can we explore what is realistic and what we can do, as opposed to just say, okay, we're going to take the state law and just run with it. Because I don't think that's feasible in Methuen.
All right, sorry. Yeah, then I misheard. I thought you were saying, let's explore 6 and up, and I'm sitting there going, okay, so we were on the same page. We're on the same page. Okay.
This is good. We're all on the same page. Because although the law allows us to not provide busing for certain grades and within certain perimeters, that's not what we're really going to entertain. We're just looking at places and neighborhoods closest to the schools that we might be able to eliminate some of our bus routes because it's close and safe for kids to get to, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we had in mind when we were expecting this conversation to be brought up. So we have ideas about that. We will absolutely be able to provide that the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, this is just fact finding. This is not an actual proposal. These are numbers that you're going to derive and present to us. This is nothing concrete. This is not a proposal. Nothing that we necessarily going to finalize. So I got
same like this.
I got to qualify it. So
yes, same like this that we would present to you. These are the neighborhoods that this is possible, and it could eliminate 17 buses or 1 bus. And is it feasible? And is it going to do anything that we needed to do? Yes.
And I was part of redistricting. I think at one point, way back in the galaxy far, far away, it was a Herculean, colossal task. Yeah. So. And I know with North Andover, right, they did a redistricting consultant, but then they're shutting down a school anyway. So that got thrown out the window. So I don't know. We'll have to really explore that other one. Thank you.
Keep going. Okay. So the next slide, this was something that Member Willett asked. So this is as concrete as I could get for you today with the numbers that I had from the state. So there was a question about CTE enrollments do bring in additional funding for our high school students. So with the information that I had last week, I had the FY25 foundation budget rate, so it's only going to be a little higher. So I'd say that. I did receive the link this afternoon for FY26. I just didn't have time to go through it and change it, so it was not on the website last week. So for a high school student in FY25, the foundation budget was set at $11,042 per student. If that high school student was also indicated to be in the vocational pathway, their cost now per pupil is their foundation budget, I don't know what it's called, amount, I guess, is $16,490, which is a $5,000 difference. So if we add CTE, so the question at hand was we have some new CTE programs on the horizon, our media production, which it already exists. We're hoping for it to become Chapter 74 certified, right? That's one. Mr. Wilkins is here. It's already a program. We are trying to certify it to be Chapter 74 certified so that it can count in this vocational, right? That's one. And then I also have 2 new FTEs that we're requesting, one for EEC, because that program is full and the requests are high, and also for marketing. So we have currently two teachers in marketing, and the request is to add a 3rd because that program also is booming. So what I did is just to keep it as, again, concrete as possible, the number could only go higher, right? If you look at the 2 new FTEs, so let's say, and I'm not going to say it, but let's just talk about 2 new FTEs in CTE. That would add about 200 students to that enrollment that would have that increased per student cost fund, right? So for the FY25 numbers, we're talking at minimum $1 million of additional revenue from the state that we would see not in FY26. It would come in FY27. So again, I did that because I wanted to be what I knew concretely and minimum. So it's only going to go up, right? So So even if we do not get the 2 new FTEs, but our media becomes Chapter 74, that is still an additional amount of money because those kids right now are not actually receiving the $16,000 per head cost for the state. They count for Perkins, they don't count for Chapter 74. I believe I said that correctly, right? So that it just gives you a sense of how the foundation enrollment works. It's fascinating. The budget rates that are set, every single category of kid has a different budget rate set. And so this is the magic of that formula. And again, I have the FY26 now. I didn't have it on Friday. I requested it specifically from the director on last week to see if they had it, if it made sense. So I hope that makes sense, but again, just gives you a little perspective, which I think is what you were looking for, Member Willett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's going to be a funding lag, because we're going to have an increase, and then we're going to be responsible for it, or it's already, and then going forward, it's because of 200 students that potentially could be, that we're gearing up, that we don't right now qualify for because we don't have that designation.
You got it.
Okay, so we wouldn't even be able to qualify for the grant funding anyways because we don't have that designation for some of the courses that, like the broadcasting one.
So the
that's still-
broadcasting one is the pathway that we are in the final stages of certifying as a Chapter 74 program. We already have that program at the high school.
Yes.
We're looking to also, we want that program, and we want all those kids in that program then would count as a vocational student with the fund here. In addition to that, Mr. Corrett and Ms. Golubsky have worked to the 2 programs that are kind of bursting at the seams right now that we would like to expand and have students who want to do it. Is our early childhood program. We currently have 1 teacher.
Okay.
And the courses her 5 sections are full. And then we have 2 marketing teachers, and both of those teachers' sections are full.
Okay.
And so we're looking to, those 2 are already certified. We add a teacher to those automatically become vocational because we already have that designation for those 2 programs.
Okay, but is there a funding lag, or that will that we?
The funding lag is the next year, nothing counts for we won't see any funding for next year. It's all from the October 1 enrollment for 2025 that we'll see for FY27.
Okay.
I know that's hard to, but like you don't see, like the investment for this, we wouldn't see the funding until we got the foundation budget in January of 2026 for the FY27 budget.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions about that one? Okay. I'm going to skip this one. Go to this one. I'll go back to it. I promise. I just wanted to, the next 4 are all the same, which is why I think these are just going to be a little bit easier and quicker. I put these on here because I had conversations with at least 3 of you via email and or directly regarding sort of this idea of like what happens when or if. And so I'm arming you with information. I'm not telling you what's going to happen or not going to happen. I'm arming you with information. For each of the grammar schools, this is something we already had. I figured I would share it tonight so you have it. This is not, I didn't have to generate anything new. This is what my team does to prepare for the budget. So what you'll see for each of the grammar schools, it's much more challenging at the high school. We can do it. It just won't be as accurate because of the numerous offerings and the different grade levels. So it's going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge if we start looking at, we can do it. It just takes us a little more time. The devil's in the detail when you're talking about the high school courses. What's required, what's not required, very different for social studies than it is for English and math, right? So we just need some time to go through that. But for the grammar schools, and again, this is just grade level. We're not talking about specials. That would be our next, I would provide that information next to for you guys. But what you see in yellow highlighted on each of these grids is what we presented to you last week. Those were the class sizes we presented to you. Those were the number of teachers in the core grade level. All right? So if the question came up, and again, I think Member Shabilia, I'm going to call you out, but you said like, I'm interested in like, what happens if we had to reduce sizes of those grade levels? So you're basically going down wherever it is highlighted. You reduce 1, that's the class size. Correct. So where we are in the yellow right now, so the Marsh, their preliminary budget as given to you guys in the narrative, they're presenting a kindergarten with 6 teachers at 16. We're trying to keep that kindergarten small. Their grades 1 and 2 are both at 5 teachers right now. Their grade 4, they're reducing to 4 teachers. Grade 3, they're reducing to 4 teachers. And then in grades 4 through 8, they're currently at 5 teachers. So again, you reduce 1, you basically go to whatever that class size is in the next column. Each of these for all 4 schools work the same. I didn't go any farther than this, but there's this pattern to this. Basically, you reduce 1, you add 5, at least. So if you had to go down to 3, you're going to add 5 to that number. So for example, grade 6, if we had to go to 3 teachers, it would be a class size of 31 or 32. I'm just saying, I'm giving you the facts. These are typically the columns we do in the Tenny and Timony. We actually do 7, 6, 5. We don't go to 4 because we can't go to 4, right? We don't have classrooms that fit that many kids. So that's what you're going to see in each of these, right? So this is the Timony. As you notice, there's no column with 4 here, but you can do the same kind of math. If you had to go to 4, you just keep adding 5. Am I making sense to everybody? So I think one thing that you'll see here is, for the most part, we reduce 1 in each of these grade levels. We're already starting at class sizes typically 26, 28 in almost everywhere. Okay? So that's the Timony. And then we have the CGS. And the Tenny. So again, you can see as you move it over 1, we're starting off in a challenging position in the majority of places. We're getting closer to 30 than we probably all feel really comfortable with. And actually here at the Tenny, you're over, if you go down to 5 teachers, you're over 30 to start in the school year.
Member Maxwell and Member Donovan.
Just a quick question. It seems like the Tenny has a lot of students in each grade.
Yes, they do. So does the Timony.
Yeah. So, never mind. I guess that's a redistricting thing. So.
The Timony and the Tenny are neck and neck right now at about just under 1,300 students, and the CGS and Marsh are about 1,000. So if you think about that, just in functioning, there's like 2 more grade levels at the Tenny and the Timony for the same amount of administrators and custodians and staff in the building. It just gives you a little different perspective by just the sheer numbers of kids in each grade level being larger.
Yeah, and if I could just build on that, when you look at the numbers, it's always startling. Like at one school, 96 8th graders, at another, 156. Mm-hmm. So you're thinking of where the rooms are going to be.
Right.
Trying to keep all the kids at the same grade level near each other. But should we, in a perfect world, be thinking about the specialists who are taking on their class? A specialist at the Tenny or the Timony has much larger classes. And I think that's, you worry about safety, you worry about classroom management, and I don't know if there's any room, it hasn't been proposed, but I do feel for them.
Yes, so you're absolutely right, Member Donovan, that the Tenny and the Timony struggle more as you have grade levels with 7 teachers and in places 8. I'm not sure we have any 8s this year. Oh no, we do have a couple 8s this year. Those 8 homerooms are filtering into 6, 5 plus band specialist classes. So at the CGS and the Marsh, the specialist classes are 5 going into 5, and you have at the Tenny and Timony 7 going into 5, 6 going into 5. So it absolutely is something to take into consideration, because as we reduce these, right, you have now, are we reducing the amount of specialist teachers? Because we have the same, then we're gonna have the same situation. So that's why I said this comes without, I'd have to do a grid like this for each of the grammar schools, so you could actually see the average class size in the specialist classes, because they are very different school to school because of exactly what you just said. We have the same number of specialist teachers
At
at the
every
Tenney
school.
and the Timoney as we do at the Marsh and the CGS for exposure and consistency of access of those topics and
And in a
courses.
perfect world, you'd break that out to guidance for caseloads. Right? I'm thinking like particularly the 8th grade, checking in with all those 8th graders may look a little bit different. Or are the guidance staff adjusted to, okay, good. Okay, thanks for
The
reminding me of that.
Timoney
I
and the
feel better
Tenney
about
do
that.
have more guidance
More,
staff than
okay.
the CGS and the Marsh.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one more question. I know it says general ed class sizes. Is this including the kids that are in inclusion classes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are any students that would be in the mainstream classroom that we're including in our class size. So the reason, and I shared this with you guys during the actual presentation last week. So the reason this one looks different, that says anticipated gen ed class size for CGS, we remove the newcomer Excel students. So we have to adjust the actual, what's the number of students in a gen ed class, because we have a newcomer Excel classroom teacher who only teaches the newcomers, and they're not mainstreamed yet. And then we have some kids who are newcomers who are ready to be mainstreamed. So Ms. Perwetti has done all of that here. I've just hidden some of those columns to show you what the outcome is. So the everything highlighted here in the class sizes that Ms. Perwetti presented would be any students that would be also mainstreamed and included in the gen ed. And the same thing with the Marsh. We pulled out the sub-separate pathways in the enrollment because those students are not going to be in the general ed, but the other special education students who are included, the resource room students and the pathways resource, are going to be included in these numbers. Okay? All right, so again, armed with information. All right, so the last one, I guess I should have put this last. So this is, again, information. And I think it's important information. And again, it's information to have out there for our conversation. And I would be remiss if I did not advocate as strongly as I could for our districts and our school department and the work that has gone into every year preparing what we need, what we believe we need best for our students. But this is something that I did not create these numbers. This is on the DESE website. You can look this up for yourself tonight if you want to check my numbers. But basically, it's a comparison of required net school spending versus actual net school spending. So it's not money that would be spent for transportation, right? So that's not what we're talking about. It's just required versus actual. The state gets these numbers and they certify these numbers, and it's listed publicly for every district in Massachusetts. So there's a couple of things. The 4 on the bottom are 4 of the districts that, number 1, they're urban districts in Massachusetts, so they're part of the Urban Gateway Network. But they're also what DESE would consider comparable districts to us. So when you look at our profile, these are 4, Framingham, Salem, Somerville, Peabody. They come up as 4 of our comparable districts by percentages of high needs, students with disabilities, English learners, low income. Okay? So I know those look very different, but that's how DESE does it. They look at our percentages by our subgroups and our low income, high needs, students with disabilities. I put Haverhill and Andover on there because they're geographically what we compare ourselves to all the time, and these are the districts that other staff might be going to and such. So you can see here, I think one of the things I'm just trying to show is that our actual net school spending for 2024 was $600,000 less than our required net school spending, which Ian could explain and was not intentional. However, which I will let him explain. My point here is that all of these other districts function because they're above net school spending and pretty significantly above net school spending year after year. If I went and looked at 23 and 22, I would see very similar numbers, right? And so this is something that I do think is information. I understand, and again, I will say it again, I'm not here to bankrupt this city, but I am here to fight for what the schools need. And every year we are faced with a really close to net school spending budget, which is never going to get us ahead. And the 2 years that I had to stand at this podium and face the city council when we got Chapter 70 money that was absolutely deserved and overdue, I was met with incredible fire of why is the school department getting so much money and you don't need so much money. And that was really challenging because I live in this community and people should have been so excited for the community to finally get money that the schools deserved. And so this is where some of the frustration comes because we are always skating right on that net school spending line, and it will, and I know we've talked about it, but if we're skating on that fine line, it is going to be catastrophic to the school district this year. If we're looking at net school spending only, we are looking at evenings and evenings of cuts that are going to be catastrophic. So the expectation of maintaining buildings and getting our students all the services they need and servicing our second language and expecting MCAS scores to grow and making sure our behavior management is in place, those are all going to be really challenging. And I feel that I would be remiss if I didn't say that and advocate for that. That is my job. That is what you put me here for. But I think that this is part of the story, and it does, it tells part of the story in this community, what is important in this community. And I hope, as a school committee, that we fight for these things. And again, Mayor, we're not looking, right? I think we're on the same page of not wanting to bankrupt the city, but what can we do differently to make sure that we're not, again, just completely devastating the things that we've tried to build. And nothing helps, and we know that, right? Nobody's gonna come to our rescue right now. We know the state has not given us what they've promised, and there's nothing anybody in this room can do about it in a time that we need it to get done. That's the reality too, right? We can advocate and we can go to our legislators, which I have been doing. I know many of you have been doing. I don't think that's gonna fix what we need in the next 6 weeks of what's ahead of us to have a budget that is ready to go for this community. So that's my last piece. But again, I just felt it important to just share some of this of like, how are other districts doing it? This is how other districts are doing it. They're not just planning for net school spending. And again, I don't know how to get there in this community. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think any of us have a magic wand or answer for it. But I hope we can continue to work towards it. I'm done.
Member Shabilia?
Thank you. I want to echo what the superintendent is saying, and I mean, there's no easy way to say it, and people are gonna get upset, but Methuen does not value education. This is embarrassing. I wish I had remembered to bring it with me, but I had pulled the last 7 or 8 years worth of net school spendings, and the lowest one on here is 8 million over net. We've never been there in the 10 years I looked at. We balance our budgets on the backs of 6-year-olds who need speech therapy, on kids who need to learn English as a second language, on the kids who need a bus. We are balancing our budgets on the backs of our children because this community doesn't care about education. I said it in 2018 when the first time I sat down and actually decided I wanted to care about Methuen politics because I knew my kids were going to be in these schools. Everyone wants to come out, and Dr. Kwong catches an awful lot of grief, but she has been handed a raw deal because we don't fund education. This is disgusting. What kind of city do we want to be? People move into a city for the schools. Ryan, you're a young guy. You're going to have a family someday. You're going to look for a house and you're going to say, where is my kid going to get a decent education? And if we don't start building towards that again, we're off the map. Right now, people are moving to Methuen because it's affordable. But true, it's not. It's not. That ship is sailing. And we last year couldn't even hit net school spending. We're planning for the minimum.
Which I'm still going to let Ian explain.
Well, right. And I know we carried it over, and I get that we have to eat it this year now. But quite frankly, I really don't care how it happened, because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. We shouldn't be planning for a D-. That's ridiculous and embarrassing. And unless the mayor has a rabbit up wherever he keeps his rabbit, that was I caught it. We have no plan. We're gonna be at net school spending. That's the ultimate reality, and we can sit here and talk about it and look at the history and bring up skeletons, and we're gonna be at net school spending. I don't think anyone around me can say that we're not going to be. It's the way it is, unless there is a massive tide change. And it's not the mayor's fault. He inherited a mess. It's not the superintendent's fault. She's advocating for what she can get. It's the city. We have not prioritized it. How do we fix that? We are the only department in the city that has to take what comes to our door. DPW can defer maintenance. The clerk's office can say, you know what, we're short-staffed, we're gonna do half days on Thursday. The fire department does not go out looking for fires. And if there are, and we need it, we buy them another ambulance. We buy them another fire truck. If there's a gang that moves into town on their scooters, we hire more cops. The school cuts. Every year, the school cuts. Every year, other departments hire. So I got a lot of grief last time when I said I'm not voting for a budget that hands the council a softball, and I stand by that. I don't see how we, as the school committee, who are supposed to advocate for the school, knowing full well that we're not getting the budget that Dr. Kwong put forward, because that's aspirational and that's not real, but putting our kids into classrooms of 30, that's ridiculous. We should all be embarrassed. I don't know where we go, and I don't know how we fix it, but quite literally everything needs to change, and I will not vote for a budget that has class sizes of that high. I just won't do it. Thank you.
Member DiZoglio?
So, to piggyback off of Member Shabilia, and again, I know I always put myself on the opposite side of things. As an educator, my class sizes right now are 28. Where if anything changes in the next month, I could have 30 kids in a class. As a teacher, it's very difficult to deal with IEP kids, 504 kids, all in one setting. And I know for other teachers on my team, it's very difficult for them to do classroom management. So, and I'm trying to look at it from a different perspective of that. It's very overwhelming, where it's not just the shellacking of the superintendent and the mayor, but also teachers get a shellacking when test scores don't go up and things don't work well, and when we're being overwhelmed over and over again. Because some people do blame teachers. I've been blamed for kids not meeting certain requirements and all that. And I look at it this way, well, when you're dealing with 30 kids, almost in every class in an hour classroom, an hour and 10-minute class, it's very difficult to fulfill every child's need. So as I said with Member Shabilia last time, as I did last year, I will not vote on a budget that is going to put not just the teachers and other staff members at a disadvantage, but our children at a disadvantage. Because our teachers can only do so much in one classroom. It is. And I've only been in the third year, but when you have, trust me, I would love for you to all sit in a classroom of almost 29 kids yelling across the room, maybe throwing a paper ball once in a while. You know, it's all these other things that teachers endure and that children endure at the classroom. We, by voting on cuts, is being a disservice over and over again, not just to the teachers, but to our students. And we just had a poll, literally 60% of the Commonwealth fourth graders do not know how to read on grade level. All right? That's, and everybody's kind of shocked, which I'll sit here, and I've been saying this for 5 years. It's because of the state with the regulations of how they put on education compared to when we were in school. When we used to have conduct and effort put on our report cards, they don't even do that anymore. All right? It's all measured. No, they don't.
Yeah, we do.
We
We do.
We did? Really? Wow.
Yes, we do.
Every other district I've talked to literally doesn't. And then, wow. That's amazing.
We do.
No, like we actually do that stuff. Well, that's shocker because I heard parents tell me all the time they really don't know that. But anyways, they all laugh about it. It's fine. I made a mistake. What we do? But at the end of the day, let's see people sit in a classroom with 28 students and see how you guys do. Because I'll tell you this, our teachers will be overwhelmed. And you think what we dealt with for the last year will be bad? Watch the future. That's how I want to end it with that. Thank you.
Vice Chair?
So 15 years ago, when my oldest was in kindergarten, she had 36 students in her kindergarten class. Her kindergarten class. We have gone, in 15 years, we've gotten that number down to 17. That's phenomenal. The work we've done in the past 15 years to get those numbers down. And it is heartbreaking to think that we have to go up again. It's absolutely heartbreaking because I know how hard it was for my kids to learn in class sizes of 30. And I mean, honestly, 36 in her kindergarten class. Imagine 5-year-olds. Like, think about that. 36 5-year-olds in one classroom, and they had 5 classrooms. Right? Like, it is, you can't learn in that environment. There's no way you can learn in that environment. And, right, and one teacher to 36 kids. It was unbelievable, the Herculean effort that those teachers did to educate those kids. And did they learn? Absolutely. My children can read, right? So it's great that my kids can read. But there are lots of kids who fall through the cracks and can't in that environment. We can't go back to that. We can't undo all of the work that we've done to bring those class sizes down. That said, we need to find other places where we can trim, and that's why in the past 15 years, we have lost janitors, we have lost secretaries, and we can't lose any more of those positions either. So we're gonna need to figure out where we're gonna trim, and that's the work we have to do. But I agree, I don't wanna see class sizes back up there because it's not reasonable. It's just not reasonable. Thank you.
Member Willett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's such a difficult situation because, and I don't dispute anything that the superintendent has said, and I've said in years past, you are obligated to tell us your deficiencies or needs within the system. And the number, again, of the $20 million increase, that was just like a preliminary number that's going to be obviously reduced. Just to give context, we're about slightly over 50,000 population, maybe 53,000 from Methuen. Boston is like roughly about 600,000 people. Their entire budget increase was about $53 million in Boston. Now, I can only imagine what type of cutbacks and reductions and retirements and lack of services, because they have well over $1 billion budget for the city of Boston. and they have roughly, let's say, 600,000 people, and we have roughly about 53,000 people. And we're talking about a $20 million increase, and I'm not disputing that. Versus what they just finalized as a budget is about $53 million. It becomes an issue about Beacon Hill. And I hate to cast aspersions to a neighboring city, but, and Member Shibili might be able to reinforce it to the superintendent. I think when you talk about net school spending, you can be below a certain amount, up to maybe even 4%, and still deal with the state. The problem is that certain communities are being inundated with school aid, and we're being sacrificed as a community because of obsolete Chapter 70 formula. I know, again, I point to Haverhill, and he did an analysis of the gateway communities, and Methuen is one of them, Haverhill's one of them, and the disparity between the inflationary rate versus what we should be getting. You're talking about, in Haverhill is $20 million. In Methuen, it's got to be at least, what, $10 million, I would say, hypothetically. If we did a full analysis.
Yes, I would say hypothetically we're.
If we
usually
accounted
have-
for inflation as it's been over the last 4 years, and the maximum amount statutorily is 4.5%. We've lost $10 million to inflation. So imagine what $10 million could have been used for our school system over the years. That's the biggest problem. And we are going through, like I said, the revenue streams. I mentioned that at a prior meeting. I'm not going to belabor the point. But if you have the city of Boston, it just has a $53 million increase for their colossal budget. We're going to obviously have to make significant cutbacks. And I don't dispute the motivations of anybody on the school committee. And they read their packets and they do their research. But it comes down to, you have a levy limit, you have a levy space, and then you have a final budget that has to be approved. And unless the state kicks in and assists us, because that was the problem with the Ed Reform Act of '93. Prior to that, you had massive disparities between the wealthy school districts and the poor school districts, and they tried to stabilize that, right? Then you had the Student Opportunity Act, and that was a further stabilization, and we had 2 significant years of increases. Unfortunately, that's when the inflationary whammy hit us. And so, again, if you can say, like, hypothetically, it would be about $10 million that we do as an estimate, that's a significant amount of money that the state is not accounting for. And I don't know what the solution is, and it could be on deaf ears at the State House. I know, that, again, the senator was the only person that responded to my letter last year and this year, and he had a conversation with me, and I know he filed an amendment on the gateway communities. I know he'll do it again. So I encourage, again, the teachers, parents, mobilize and start making calls, because the House budget has not been released yet. There's going to be an amendment process. The Senate will have a competing budget. Then you have a conference committee. You reconcile it, send it to the governor, and there has to be a message from both the House and Senate that we're really dying at the local level in terms of school aid. We really are. And whatever you're talking about in terms of millionaire's tax and pot dispensaries and casinos and DraftKings and everything under the sun, a lot of it's going into a general fund. I know the mayor can attest that incrementally you really haven't added that much of an increase in local aid. You might have had some increase in Chapter 90, a little bit. And then school aid, we've been decimated by, and we're going almost into a pre-COVID era now. With it's going down, with the inflation, it's still there. It's a very bad formula, and we fight for our students, obviously. And I have kids in the system, like many people have kids in the system. And I can't, compared to being a teacher, I was never a teacher, I was a public servant, and I didn't get paid that great of a salary. But again, it's our fight is not local right now. Our fight is at the state, at least make an effort to approach your leaders on Beacon Hill. But again, last year I didn't see it, and I'm not seeing it now. So it's a very difficult situation. Thank you.
Member Donovan and then Member Maxwell.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Mr. Goslin's going to share the.
Okay. And then my follow-up question, it's to you, Dr. Kwong. I mean, are there any updates? There's so many crazy rumors going around about our federal funds, the titles money. Maybe you could address that, if there is anything to address.
I can, that's quick. I don't have any updates. I think the hardest part for us is that Mr. Goslin and I are both hearing that our colleagues are just going with it and expecting the funds and not and potentially preparing for a contingency plan. That's not typically how I can work, and I don't think that is a safe way for us to work. So I have not received, I asked again today, I did send another email to the Director of Federal Grants at DESE, who I emailed a week ago. I don't want to overwhelm them. I have not heard back, but I have not heard confirmation one way or the other, so I'm just kind of holding on where we are. I mean, we know exactly how much it would be removed or added. You know, I think that's a decent place for us to be at this point. At least we know where those salaries would be added and how much money that we would actually be eligible for. That I did get confirmation that we would be, our eligibility is equal to last year. So he did confirm that with me. As of January, our status would be the same, whether or not those funds come. It's just nobody wants to put that in writing and confirm it at this time. And then Ian can explain to you the.
Yeah, I don't want you to think it was intentional by any stretch on the city's part, but our budgeted number was above net school spending by almost $300,000, 200 and some change. When we do the final end of the year report, there are some numbers that come pre-populated, which it's the state populates them. So we punch in all our numbers, what we spent and everything. There are two numbers in there. Well, they combine. It has to do with charter reimbursement. So we get assessed for charter schools, but they do reimburse us for some funds. They deducted that off of our spending, which put us just under net school spending. So we had budgeted above. I would never let the city budget below net school spending. I just was unaware they were going to deduct those reimbursements right off of the budget. So that's my short and sweet explanation.
And it was, we had to fix it in 25.
Yes. And when you're off, when you're slightly under, they look at next year's budget to make sure that you're above that. Our FY25 budget, so when I do the end of the year report, I have to do actuals for FY24, and then I have to do what's budgeted for FY25. Yeah. And what's budgeted for FY25 covers that difference. So the state was happy with that. That with what, if we spend what's budgeted this year, we'll cover that $664,000.
And if I may, one of my questions, I was really curious to see, what we have to pay for the charter school students. And I'm wondering if you've seen a big
We could tell you.
change. Yeah.
I was going to say,
I just read an article before I was leaving the house that somehow, perhaps, our federal administration might somehow be forcing communities to use title money to pay for some of these tuitions. I just glanced at it briefly, so I hope I misread it.
I didn't actually hear you. Can you say it one more time?
loud and proud.
I know, it's hard to hear.
I'm not too proud about it. No, I'm the money we spend to pay for charter school tuitions. Mm-hmm. I know there is some rumbling at the federal level about how title money may be used. Yeah, I read it on the way out the door, I read it, so I will reread it. Somehow, some of that money may be used to fund tuitions to, yes, charter schools. I will send you the article.
I mean, the current, the FY26 assessment for school choice and charter is $3.169 million.
3.169?
2.5 for charter and about 600 for school choice tuitions.
How much? Okay, and the balance was for school choice. Thank you.
Member Willett? Okay. Oh, Member Maxwell, I'm sorry.
I just want to point out, like, I don't think anybody's trying to take teachers away to add more students. I think we want to add more teachers to lower the class size. So I just want to put that out there because the conversation seemed a little confusing. But as far as the DESE comparable districts, I feel like I'm told all the time that our most comparable district is Malden. Am I wrong?
It's one of our comparable districts. I didn't add all 8 just because I didn't want to make this so small.
Okay. I just asked because, like, that is the one that is always like, this is our comparable district.
Yep,
So I always base
Barnstable
everything-
is another one that would have been on there that would have had similar number. Yep, Barnstable is another comparable district for DESE, Taunton, and Malden, and Quincy. So they're just those 4 were additional ones. Again, I was typing this out today. I didn't add those 4 to make it as small. I thought it was important to add Andover and Haverhill just because of the geographic
Location.
understanding. Yeah. But you're absolutely correct. We do. Mostly Malden because it's a K-8 district. That's why we're so comparable to them.
And size
Where
and-
DESE doesn't care about the K-8 part. We are comparable because of the statistics, the groups.
I gotcha.
But we often compare ourselves to Malden because they have K-8 schools, and there's not a lot of districts that have K-8 buildings like ours.
Okay.
Yep. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Member Willett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the governor has, in her budget that she presented, does account for federal funds. So ultimately, if we're all in the same boat and it becomes an unfortunate situation with the elimination of federal funds, which I don't believe will occur, right? The governor's budget does account for Medicaid funds and other federal funds coming down the pike, and she presented that in her budget. So I think we have to be, again, very careful, and I think the superintendent has the right approach. Once we receive information, it'll be presented to the school committee, but I will not subject to speculation other than that, personally. Thank you.
Member Shabilia?
Real quick, I just want to restate and remind that, Ian, you had mentioned that we were planning last year to be 200-ish K over net school spending. That's the D- I was talking about. We are planning
I'm not
to
saying that's
barely
great. I'm
pass.
saying that that's the number.
Right, but I mean, none of these communities were in jeopardy of, oops. We are planning to be not even mediocre. We are planning to be sad and pathetic. That's our goal, guys. For unfortunately for the mayor, sorry, buddy. Unfortunately for the city council, like that is our plan. We are planning to be the bare minimum possible to survive. That's our goal. That's where we are as a city right now.
Any other questions or comments? Member DiZoglio?
Just as Member Shabilia keeps saying, but this is where like I said, I feel like I know the mayor's going to give us a number, and at the same time, we accept it, we don't accept it, and we send it up to the council. Like I said, like I did last year, I said I will not send the budget up, and I know that the council will kick it back, and people are upset that we play that whole mind game. But I just want to say the councilors that I continue to talk to will always say, we always say yes. They always say yes. Well, because they know there was a number given, so of course they're going to say yes to it. They can't tell us no and cut more. Yeah, but in the end, no, but it wasn't as much as they if we go over it. No,
They gave you a number, you sent them a budget, they kicked it back and said cut some more. That's facts.
yeah. Wait, so wait, I still have 5. Yeah, it was less than what it was the year prior.
2 years ago, we received a number.
Yeah.
We met the number, and the city council rejected our budget, and we had to reduce more for them to accept our budget.
We had to reduce it by $350,000, and agree to an audit.
Member Willett and then Member Donovan.
I think the operative word here, and the mayor highlighted it, and I concur with him, is Proposition 2.5 override, which I know for a fact, because I've served in this community for 14 years, will never pass. So you have a levy amount and you have a levy limit, and I think the prior budget was about $300,000 in terms of the space of the final. If you went over that, you would have to do a Prop 2.5 override. Again, the reality of the situation is we're going to have very limited options as a community, and we should face that unless we get additional infusion of dollars from the state, which I've been saying for the last couple of years. But I won't be party to that, even close to that Proposition 2.5 override. And then looking at the prior budget, I can't see how you can have a much bigger increase. Thank you.
Member Donovan?
So while I feel like we're looking at the seat cushions, the sofa for money, let's talk about the cable money. Every year, I mean, I've been watching school committee meetings for years for reasons I can't explain. But that said, every year there's a discussion, where does the cable money go? Because we know we get money from the companies that contract with our city. And from my understanding, I could be way off on this, the check goes directly to the city. The schools are supposed to get a percentage, the city gets a percentage, and there's a third party. Help me out, Dan. I don't know who that is.
So when those contracts are negotiated between the city and Verizon, or the city and Comcast,
Right,
the city and Comcast, which we just approved the Comcast contract Thursday of last week, whatever day it was.
Yeah.
There is a sum of money that gets cut to the city based on the number of subscribers. Historically, it goes to the city, and it's supposed to be divided between the city, the school, and Methuen Community Television.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
I don't know what MCTV has received. I do know that I've learned since we had this conversation that not too long ago in the Ed Lucia era, there were all those drops and fiber was brought to every building, which was about $100,000.
Right. And I just wish we could, and no offense to anyone, but if offense is taken, I'm good with it. Can we please have an accounting of where that money went? Because I think it's been, I don't know, every year. It's like, oh yeah, and maybe it all comes out in the wash, but I would feel better in terms of transparency. Are we getting everything that is due to us? I don't know. So on top of the DPW request, may I ask, Mayor? Because I think it would come from you other than this team. I don't know. Tell me otherwise. You don't see it at all. And I would hate for any of that to kind of come back to bite us. If it's meant to go in one place, it should go to that place, I think. So if we could have that information, that would be very helpful.
I will have that for the next
I
time we meet
appreciate
as a
that.
school board.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Totally changing topics. Can you tell me what percentage increase from last year to this year is our budget? And I'm asking because, people are always asking us, what are we doing with all our money? And I just want to point out that we've negotiated lots of contracts that's automatically going to increase our budget by X percent every year. And so I'm curious as to what percentage over our contractual increases are we from year to year? Do you know what I'm saying? So like, yes, $20 million over last year is a lot, but what percentage of our budget is that? And I know I could figure it out, but I don't have it, right? And I just want to point out that, we have contractual obligations that have increased our budget. If we just kept everything the same, our budget's going to increase. And what percentage of net school spending from last year to this year is the increase? Do you see what I'm saying? So does net school spending even cover our contracts? Yeah, our contracts that we just negotiated and gave people raises, right? So if we increase just by net school spending, we do not have enough money to cover the contracts that we've negotiated with our staff. Is that correct? or transportation? Okay,
The answer is no. We do not have, net school spending does not give us the increase we need for transportation contractual obligation increase, out-of-district tuition obligation increase, or contractual staff increase.
okay. So if the city gives us just net school spending,
We're still cutting.
we have to cut what we have right now because it doesn't cover our contractual obligations for what we have right now. That's not adding a wish list. That's not adding anybody.
Correct.
And then we have 30 positions that we have to fund above and beyond what we have this year. And that's going to be above that. So I just want people to understand that net school spending isn't even going to cover our contractual obligations that we currently have right this minute.
Correct.
And I don't think people understand that. They think that we're spending extra money on more things, and we're not. It's the price of what we have right now has gone up. And we can't afford it because the net school spending isn't going up enough to even cover what we currently have.
Correct.
So,
And that was, yes, you're 100% right. Yes, correct. In that this was part of the reason I had as much detailed conversation as I did last Monday for people to understand, rewatch, hand out, whatever it is, to understand that the way, and I will apologize because I think I misspoke when Member Willett asked me when the last time the foundation formula was adjusted, and I said 2019, and that was incorrect. It wasn't adjusted. The foundation formula stayed the same. They just added the supplemental SOA amount to that formula. So I did misspeak. It was added to it. It wasn't changed. So you still have this foundation formula that, again, gives you this crazy percent of in-district special education kids, a crazy 1% of our out-of-district tuition kids, for the right reason, which I do understand now. They don't want to incentivize students being over-identified. However, it is so underfunded the way that it is calculated. And I don't know how else to explain that other than looking at, if I show you, and I'll be happy to share it with all of you, the base foundation per pupil, where I got that 11,000 versus the 6. It's a big chart that comes out of this 10-page how they calculate the formula, and then you're left with this chart, and that's how they calculate each child. And it's every student category is a different amount. So your K-4 kids are a different amount than your middle school kids, than your high school kids, than your CTE kids, than your special education kids, than your English learner kids. It's a remarkable formula, but it's again, to account for in-district services with one flat number for a 3.9% of your total in-district students, of which all we're trying to do is keep our in-district kids in sub-separate programs in their neighborhood schools and not send them out of district. I don't know how we continue to fund that, because what we are funding are out-of-district programs, but in our community for our kids, with our kids in the neighborhood, and so they are with each other. And we've also held that, I know since I've been here, that has not been something that any school committee or any superintendent I've worked with has wanted to do differently. But those numbers are growing, and so we're expanding our in-district program, but the state is not recognizing the changes to that in-district special education child and how much those children as well cost for transportation, right? So one thing we could do right now, so I take back what I said a little bit on the state's not gonna fix our problem that we need fixed in 6 weeks, because that's our reality. The conversation about circuit breaker is a reality, and people should pay attention to that right now, all of us, because whatever is decided with circuit breaker right now with our legislators absolutely can impact FY26. And while it's not going to fix 15 million or 20 million, it's going to fix some of it. It will increase the amount of reimbursement we get. It could increase or make definitive the amount of out of district transportation and not have to wait until the state has leftover money and then we get something later. We could budget for it. Right now, we're not budgeting for any out of district transportation reimbursement. We don't know if we're going to get it. Again, I'm not willing to roll that dice. I don't think you are either. That we would say, oh, we'll budget for a 44% reimbursement because that's what it was this year. We don't know what it's going to be. So we're not going to do it. So that is something that I think we all, if folks are listening at home, the conversation about circuit breaker reimbursement is real and live and actually could impact our FY26 movement. So I would encourage everybody to write your legislators right now about that, to really increase that fully funded to 90%.
Yep.
Right? And fully funded doesn't mean fully funded, right? But the amount above that threshold tuition amount, rise it to 90%. That gives us a little more reimbursement and give us an absolute, they want to get to 100% reimbursement for out of district transportation. Confirm it, make it just done so that we can budget for it. That's a huge cost and a huge struggle. So it would help. And again, it's not going to be the end all of this, but that is something that we could do right now.
Thank you.
Member Willett and then Member Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the clarification on the foundation budget and Chapter 70. I recall going back to the school committee, and we had experienced a massive decrease in the expected Chapter 70 growth. And one of the revealing things was even that amount of money, I think it was $3.8 million, that was destined to be swallowed up by special education costs automatically. That you had that Chapter 70 increase. So I can only imagine the smaller amount, I think is 2.4 million. That's automatically out the window. And it's a commitment to special education. And again, so like I said, and I already sent the letter, and the senator was the only one that returned my call and returned the letter as a response. Senator Jake Oliveira is the one that's filed the legislation to increase it to 90%. And I think it's important to emphasize is that it's a very fluid situation about the out-of-district special education transportation costs, because we just got that recently at 44%, but that could be erased very easily. So that has to be the circuit breaker. I think it's a strong term, circuit breaker. The House is in peril right now. And again, these kids are entitled to services. I don't want to have any calls from anybody that says, I want to reduce special education. They're entitled to the services. And I think we've made major headways. And like the vice chair mentioned, in terms of the class sizes, all that's going to be out the window if we can't wrestle confidently the circuit breaker. So 90% reimbursement, maintaining at least 44%, if not more, with the transportation costs, because that's going to devour the rest of the budget. People talk about Medicare and Medicaid and entitlement programs, and that's swallowing the federal budget and the projections. We know the circuit breaker is swallowing our budget, and it's not fair to the kids, it's not fair to the parents, it's not fair to us as a school district, but that's the reality of the situation. So I think maybe that's the right focus, is to have people make calls on that front. Thank you.
Member Maxwell.
So it looks like everyone's like almost ready to go home, but I have a few questions that were in the budget now that I was able to review them at home. Are we gonna bring this back to the table and talk about this section again, or are we just talking about the packet that you gave us today?
It's a discussion. Bring up the questions you had.
So I have a few. I just assumed that we were gonna go like section by section again, but I'll try to narrow them down to a few. So one of my questions specifically was the addition of the risk coordinators. I know that we added a risk coordinator to the Chimney last year, and that was based off of we had 197 ODRs, and 70 of them were fights, bullying, and harassment. And the argument there was that it took up a lot of the assistant principal's time. What are the ODRs at the other schools, and how many of them are level tier 2?
So I think in the
just
in
one
the
question.
in the narrative for the CGS and the Marsh, I think they had in their paragraph about the risk coordinator, they put some of their own data in that paragraph that said how many school office behavior incidents they had, how many students were involved,
They
how many
did.
were repeated.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
only question I had were how many of them were level tier 2.
So I'd have to ask.
Okay.
Yep.
That was one of the questions. Another question was, I know that we have the media centers in here, and don't get me wrong, I want the libraries back. I totally want that. Have we looked into volunteers and PTO groups and all of that to try and take the need away from hiring someone? Where is the update on
We will explore whatever the committee would like us to explore.
that? Okay. I know that, so in these budgets, the Timony, for instance, is relatively the same as last year in a sense of like staffing needs and all of that. I'm curious because last year, we were going to look into the Timony specifically to find out why 51% of their students versus the other schools weren't reading at or above grade level. And I know that you said that you would come back to us kind of with the investigation on that. I know that we haven't heard back on that, and I just feel like with the staff that they're requesting, what is the change? Is there a significant change that we will see a benefit to the kids and their growth this year? Or are we just gonna, I'm assuming the reading rates are coming out soon, but are we going to see that the Timony is still at 51% that aren't reading at or above grade level versus the 42.5% that aren't at the Tenny, the 39% that aren't at the Marsh? What have we done to correct it? Like when are we gonna see the measurable results for that? What are we gonna do differently? I'm just curious because I know that we said that the curriculum is the same and the style is the same and we really just didn't have an answer on why there was such a difference at the Timony because we took EL students out of that number. It was, out of 885 non-EL students, 51% were not reading at grade level.
Yeah, I think we have agreed at the April 14th meeting that
That's
we're
when we're
gonna,
gonna revisit.
we're gonna do a quarter update because we should have done it in March, but we
I thought
we
so.
wanted
That's
to do
why
the
I
whole
wanted to
thing
ask.
for the budget
Okay.
to get that out early. So Lisa's gonna do an update, which will have the mid-year scores and the questions I believe that you just asked.
Okay.
So that is delayed a little bit, but we had it originally on the agenda to do both things on March 24th, and then I thought about it and removed it because I thought the budget meeting would last a little bit longer. So that will be April 14th.
I also couldn't find any information when I looked up that program. I know it started with a C, Constellations. I couldn't find any information. If maybe you could share a little bit more information about, I know you gave us like a breakdown, and it doesn't have to be public. You can just let me know, but I'm just curious what that program actually is.
Like what they have agreed to do for us specifically. Yeah.
And one last thing, I'm sorry guys, I know you all want to get out of
Don't
here.
say sorry.
I know that we're looking to add team facilitators to each school. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that not what the director of special education does in each school? They're like the team facilitator?
Yeah, so the special ed administrator right now does all of it. They evaluate and supervise the teachers, and they run all of the meetings and compliance. And that has become incredibly overwhelming for one person to do in the buildings as large as they are. At the high school, we have 2 administrators that run the programs at the high school, and we would like to see something similar to that at the grammar schools.
Okay.
It's an impossible job right now that we're asking one person to do and maintain compliance and
Is there
oversight.
a way to make that a district position, or is there a heavy need per school? to have
It's
any.
really, it's really per school because the person would be running initial evaluations and reevaluations, and those are happening every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the STEM supervisor and the humanities isn't in here, the STEM supervisor, I'm curious, with our comparable districts, I've looked up a lot of their positions, and it looks like they have directors of those programs rather than just being an individual school title. Is that something that we could look into, having 1 versus 4, and maybe that could save some money?
Yes, so those are all ideas that I think will come from our continued discussions.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's the majority of my questions. If there are more,
Yeah, so the bigger ones Lisa, I think, will answer the reading questions during the April 14th quarterly.
Okay.
I will have to get you the information from the Marsh and the CGS about the ODRs. Okay? I think that's what I just heard as far as asks.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or discussion? I'm going to quickly wrap before we move on to selecting the dates for our additional budget workshop meetings. So I think tonight the conversation was one that was certainly based in reality. And that reality is that we are facing in our city, when it comes to our outlook for fiscal year 26 in terms of revenue, we're facing a perfect storm. In the past couple of months, we lost one of our largest sources of non-residential tax revenue by way of Holy Family. Very grateful that the hospital is still alive and operating under the umbrella of Lawrence General, but Lawrence General is a nonprofit, and that revenue is out of the picture. Our residents at the local level, I think if you were to talk to any residential taxpayer, you'll probably hear the same message, and that is that they are taxed enough already. It's already a struggle for people to pay their bills. We have an increase in the cost of living that folks have endured, and that is only becoming more difficult. We have limits to state funding that we've talked about. We have uncertainty at the federal level. But, even though those challenges are certainly there, and we have to be cognizant of them, I have been on a mission as our new mayor to make our government function better. And at this point in developing my first budget as our city's mayor, I have a few different priorities in mind as it relates to a plan forward. So right off the bat, we are identifying and pursuing opportunities to make our government, especially on the city side, more efficient. And another thing that we're doing as well is we're going to be going through the process on the city side as well of putting together department by department a strategic plan, which is something that hasn't been done in some time. In terms of the budget on our end on the city side as well, we're going to be putting forward a responsible, conservative budget that ultimately preserves essential services for our city, but does so in a fiscally responsible manner. And I think the most important thing that we're going to do, aside from maintaining as conservative of an operating budget as we can, is we're going to be embarking going forward on a real concerted effort to expand our commercial tax base so that our residents aren't forced to bear as much of the burden. There are no quick and easy fixes to any of these issues. We're not going to get to a point where I think we need to be overnight. But this is the direction that we're rowing in, and we're going to get there in spite of the difficulties we face in the coming weeks and months. At this point, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the selection of the dates for the next budget workshop meetings. Open to discussion about that. Do we have any proposed dates, Superintendent?
Question is, do we want to have another meeting next week prior to April 14th? That's really the only option, is to meet, next week before the April 14th business meeting. if not, that will be another pretty lengthy meeting. I just, again, worry about the time frame between April 14th and the time our budget approved vote and budget hearing is scheduled already for May 21st because of the timeline that we have to follow for the city. Unless that is pushed back or changed, that is the timeline we're following that we have had for the past, I'd say, 2 or 3 years. So I'm just a little worried about that time frame to do the work that we may have to do. I'm not saying it can't be done. So I'm looking either if we're going to meet again on the 14th, I will certainly have some of the requests that you've asked, some additional information for that evening. But we should probably schedule between April 24th, which is a workshop night, which is good. Oh no, 24th. Is it the 24th? 28th is a workshop night. We should probably schedule, I would say, one for the week of May 5th. At the very least, to have another one in there before May 12th, which is when we're going to have a final budget, which again, the weeks are just structured differently because March got that today in. March got the 31st in, so it's moved all the weeks back from when our meetings are.
So if the mayor is committing to having us a number by the end of the week, and next week, I mean, we're going to need some time to digest that. Your team is going to need time to digest that. Our meeting is regularly scheduled for the 14th, and I assume we have like other stuff to do that night. Is everyone opposed to doing something, I don't know, midweek, Wednesday, Thursday? Because, I mean, to Dr. Kwong's point, if we wait, this is going to be a shotgun wedding.
I'm open.
I would recommend Wednesday as opposed to Thursday because Thursday is a half day and you're going into April vacation and Easter and Good Friday, etc. So I would just recommend Wednesday versus Thursday.
I'm sorry, I missed that, and I apologize.
Recommendation was avoiding the Thursday before the Easter weekend, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, yes, so the 15th or 16th for us is good. Yes, we'd prefer not to do it on the 17th, but we'll do it if we had to.
I'm down for either.
Wednesday, the 16th, that gives us a day. So I'd make sure everything was posted on Monday, which is good, because that gives me Monday to get like as close to a final packet and numbers as I can. 16th at 6 o'clock, are we good for
There we
that?
go. Good. Very good. All right. So we have our next date. At this point, do we have any other business from the committee?
May I ask, and I apologize, can I ask a clarifying question? Do you want me to not have a budget on the 14th? Like, do you want me to not have that topic on the 14th and hold it for the 16th and just have a workshop just about the budget? Yes. So business meeting on the 14th, we can do the quarterly, we can have awards, we can do everything that's on our normal business. And then budget on the 16th will focus. Okay, thank you.
good.
That helps me. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah. Other business?
Other business, I would just ask for an update from Member Donovan from our January meeting when you were going to meet with the superintendent to review changes on how school data is reviewed. School data, I know you said you were going to meet with the superintendent to discuss. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. Maybe I was thinking that it was other data. Yeah. Okay.
The school committee, how we presented the data to the school committee was the new chart with the enrollments and withdrawals and residency so that it was in one place and more efficient for the team.
I didn't know if that meant the school data that's given back to us on the regular. I'm trying to think of a certain specific report that you give back to us. I didn't know if that would affect reports given back to us or if it was just that specific enrollment. Yes. No, I was just looking for an update. I didn't know if there was more to understand. And then one other question is, can we potentially look into MAP testing? MAP. I'm assuming you know what that means.
We do.
Okay, that's all. That was my only chew.
I know I'm not on the committee, but I do want to give you an update on the studio equipment at the high school. We did have a contractor come in and look through it and find out what the problems are, gave us a stock list of new switches, new equipment that we need to the tune of about $16,000. We're in the process of getting quotes for that stuff right now. My deadline to get the quotes is Thursday morning so that we can put in an order Thursday afternoon. And I've already signed an agreement for that vendor to come in and install it and get it up working correctly. So I'm working as quickly as I can to get it done. It's going to probably be a week or two. Let's say 3.
Yeah, we will.
We'll keep you posted.
We'll keep you posted. If we have to have the meeting here on the 14th, our business meeting, I will make sure that MCTV knows that so that we are in the clear unless I have the full 100% guarantee and all the equipment is installed by the 14th. I won't take that chance. I will let you know next week. Yeah, TBD. I'll let you know next week. If everything comes in as it's supposed to, we could be fine for the 14th.
So offhand here, I throw out the idea, as you were saying, that it's going to cost $16,000 to probably fix that equipment. I threw out the idea of simply saving money by having our meetings here, but Member Shabilia just referenced accreditation for chapter. Refresh my memory.
For your CTE class, you need that to maintain accreditation.
Okay.
You're not on that committee.
All right. I know, right? Yeah. Member Donovan?
I just feel like we need to acknowledge a few things. This has been a tough meeting. Friday night, Member Keegan and I, Dr. Kwong, we were lucky enough to go to the military ball, the ROTC. It was, I can't describe it. Amanda Aziz was recognized as Teacher of the Year, selected by those students, so it was really meaningful. And in addition, this week I've been hearing about some of the college acceptances, which is not my story to tell, but I hope we get to hear some of the colleges that our students are going to. It just is amazing. So there is some good stuff happening as we deal with there is, as we try to find a way to fund the continuation of the good stuff. So I just wanted to share that.
Can I
Vice Chair?
actually? I'm sorry.
I just also want to congratulate the Winter Color Guard for coming in first place at finals this past week. Those kids work so hard, and it is not a trivial thing. And they have come so far in the past few years, and I just want to say congratulations to them.
All right. Anything else? Thank you. All right. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Member Shabilia. The second is from Member DeZoglio. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The time is 8:33, and we are adjourned.
Good night, Methuen.